So I'd like to start with one key quote that I like to use over and over. I'm personally a fan of motor racing, and as I'm sure most of you, a lot of you are. But one of the things that stuck with me that Mario Andretti said, who's a former NASCAR race car driver, for those of you who don't know, he had a very interesting quote a few years ago where he said, if things seem under control, you're just not going fast enough, right? I immediately identified and associated with that just as a tester, right? Where, in any of the engagements, any of the projects that I used to work in and I'm continuing to work in, I've always had that challenge given to me either by my development lead or the project manager or the scrum master to say, hey, how can you actually, speed up the testing process? Right, and I think with the availability of CI/CD tools for us, I think this is something that is becoming a reality now, where as things seem to pick up pace and we are able to test more efficiently in terms of speed. It's always pushing the envelope to the next level, right? To say, hey, how can we even get faster than what we are doing now? And that's a great, I think, topic to continue talking about. What besides CI/CD can we as testers do to actually increase the speeds? Coming back to CI/CD, right? One of the key things that we have to always think about is why do we need test automation in our solution, right? Why do we need to apply and leverage CI/CD tools? So if you take a step back and you think about really what is happening within the industry right now, right? I think one of the key observations you will make is that the global competition with software providers, right? The global competition has basically allowed the end users of those systems, those applications, to have a very low tolerance level for defects, right? I can use an example of mobile apps, right? Studies have shown where as people download mobile apps, if they don't like what they see within the first 45 to 50 seconds, they close the app, they uninstall the app, and they're not coming back, right? So, that is one example of low tolerance that has occurred simply due to just the availability of so many alternatives out there today, right? And that's fueled really by the global sense of competition to get to market and get open as early as possible, right? And that leads into the second aspect. Along with low tolerance for defects, the other pressure that I think delivery teams and agile teams feel is how soon can we get a new iteration, a new idea, a new feature, a better feature out in the hands of the users as soon as possible. So that has definitely resulted in putting extra pressure for the agile teams to deliver in shorter and faster iterations as part of their product lifecycle. From that perspective, as engineers, when we find and try to find solutions, the industry buzzword, if you will, has been DevOps, right? I definitely agree with DevOps being as an integral part of this solution, right? But for teams that are not mature yet and have not gotten a lot of the DevOps tool chains in place, I would recommend starting with step one, which is CI/CD, right? Continuous integration, continuous delivery. So really, from a tester's perspective, what does that really mean, right? What this basically means is we have to test earlier and test more often. Obviously, that can be accomplished very efficiently, very effectively with applying automation tools such as Catalog. The second aspect, though, is a little bit more tricky. But what that is basically how do we test earlier and test often, but how do we also continue to test real world workflows, right? And what I mean by that is really the scenarios or the processes and workflows that are going to be really used by the end user or audience of the system under test, right? And in order for you to do that, it cannot completely be dependent just on your automation scripts or your automation tests. There has to be an aspect of manual exploratory testing that has to occur. However, if you do not leverage automation tests and leverage it in your CI/CD pipeline, you're in essence as a tester not going to have a lot of time to actually go and do exploratory testing to add more value to the product being delivered out there. So one key thing that I do see continuing to be missed as people adopt CI/CD and do real world workflows and testing in that regard is testing with a comprehensive mindset. And what I mean by that is, not just focusing on functional tests and whether a particular screen looks good, whether an API service provides the appropriate information, but also look at things around performance, around usability, around accessibility. Things of that nature are also what makes the overall user experience and their adoption level of your product, of your software, that much higher. So it's very important that as testers, when we begin testing applications, we're not just limiting it to just the functional aspect. Functionality is definitely a core key component, but from an adoption perspective for the intended audience or target users of the system, we have to look at it from other angles as well. So let's look at a traditional or a typical CI/CD pipeline, right? What I have on the screen here is an example of where you may be able to apply different tools as part of your CI/CD pipeline when it comes to testing. So as I'm sure a lot of you may be familiar already, if you think about a CI/CD pipeline, there's two components to it, right? The integration piece, which is essentially as the code is being developed by different developers in the team, they will begin checking in their code in your code repositories such as GitHub or what have you, right? And as all of that code is committed and merged back, the overall build process is kicked off as part of the CI pipeline. Tools such as Circle CI, such as Jenkins, definitely that build out the packages and then help validate the integrity of the code, is where as testers we can definitely use tools such as Catalan to jump in and supplement the testing that is going on right after the unit test. Right, so I, in our experience, have used Catalan as part of the integration tests, as well as also performing a series of high priority tests, functionality validations, and things of that nature also within the CI pipeline. Because the one key important aspect that you get with applying automation into your CI/CD pipeline is to be able to test sooner and hence give faster feedback, earlier feedback to the developers if you encounter issues, right? So using that as a business priority to integrate tests sooner is a key advantage that you can now benefit and apply using Catalan. The second half of this is the continuous delivery pipeline, right? So that's essentially where once the code that is packaged and built and is ready to be deployed into different environments, you actually could use tools such as Docker and Kubernetes and Puppet to orchestrate and have all of that created for you. Right, and the CD pipeline is in essence another area where you can then reapply a different suite of tests from Catalan and make sure that your validations and things of that nature are effectively done as well. The good part of this sort of layout is, even though you have dedicated environments that you call out as, QA or staging or production, in essence, by using an approach such as applying Catalan into like containers and such, you are stepping away from having a finite set of these environments. You can actually have categories of environments where you can group them as pre-prod or prod, and the number of environments under each of these two categories is totally related by how many parallel environments you can actually support within your infrastructure. So here is an example of how I would recommend setting up an automation in your CI/CD pipeline. Right, one of the key important things for you to think about is how do you logically organize and group your test cases and test suites. Right? Do you tag them? Do you associate them with a certain code branch, or tag them in certain functional modules of your code? Just so that way you can logically organize and be able to pull up a specific suite of tests depending on the area of the system or the code that is being modified, right? So having a logical group is important. The second aspect of that, because of the way you actually can now logically group these test suites, you can apply rules within your build servers and also in your repositories to be able to dynamically select and choose what test suites are required to be executed. Catalan also has a capability of tagging and then also creating dynamic test suites based on certain triggers. So you can definitely leverage that aspect as well. And then once all of that is identified, you can configure that with the CI/CD server to be able to automatically, execute a bigger suite or a smaller suite or a specific suite based on the type of code changes and commits that have been done. And what that actually allows you to do is mitigate a bit of risk to say, what is the impact of the direct changes to the code that have occurred so far. And then you also get the flexibility of creating a parallel effort of a bigger regression suite if that's what is needed. Right? And once you have all of that configured, you can trigger and run the tests based on those conditions. And the great part of this is because it's part of like an auto kickoff and auto selections, the key analysis aspect comes in where you may at this point need some manual oversight to go in and analyze it. The great part about where our industry is headed is that could technically also potentially in the very near term be supported by AI and ML algorithms as well.